Just going back to identify for a moment, Alan, describe to the listeners the best way to actually approach the identification of your values. So and I think a lot of people will identify, you get 4 or 5 of the senior leadership team in a room. We come up with some of the nice words, maybe even Google others' websites and go, that's a really nice word. Let's use that as one of our values. We come out of the room, we hand it to the marketing department, and there you go. There's our values. What would you describe as the exemplar approach to actually identifying your values in the first instance?
Yeah. So I don't think there is an exemplar example, because each organization is different in itself. It's also at a different stage in itself, and it might be going to a different place. So all of those things need to be taken into account when deciding how to go about it. But I think there are some sort of fundamental principles that you can adopt and apply. So the first thing that might be a bit controversial is that I think that deciding what the values are is the responsibility of the leadership team, full stop. So lots of people advocate that you should involve all of the employees and maybe different stakeholder groups to that as well. And I totally agree with that. However, for you to take that input and just boil it down into a distillation or a consensus of everybody, I think is potentially a big mistake. And the reason for this is that the leaders of the organization are the people who know where it's going in the future better than anybody else. And it might be that you've got some people currently in the organization that are not the right people for where it's going in the future. So why would those people influence what the values of the organization for the future is going to be? So that's the first thing, leaders' decision. Having said that, involvement of employees really does help a lot. And the reason for this is that, in my experience, I find that employees don't necessarily want to make the decision or expect their voice to be the decision, but they want to be involved. And as long as you involve them and then explain to them why that you either took on board their input or why you did not, then they kind of understand it. They might not like it, they might like it, but more important, they understand it. So to have widespread involvement, I think, is another principle, but not at the cost of leaders taking responsibility and accountability for making the decision. I would also say don't involve a marketing agency or a PR agency, because then the perception in the business becomes that it was somebody else that did this. And with the 31 practices, I think every time I do a project, the thrill of when you announce the 31 practices, when they've been signed off by the leadership team, and what you're able to say to all of the employees in the business is, guys, this is what you came up with, so can you just go and do it now? That is totally different to when you've got a marketing agency that comes up with this stuff, and then you come up with a comms program to try and convince everybody that they should do what these guys came up with. And it's like chalk and cheese. And I remember a guy in New York, a postroom guy, he chased me down the corridor with his carry card, and he said, "Alan, do you remember number 16? I suggested that." And you can't buy that, that level of engagement.
No, I love that. And in terms of the embedment of behaviors into an organization aligned to the values, when you get that right, we talk about it being rocket fuel.